Hey, what's up folks? Jam Book Reviews here with another manga review. The series I'll be reviewing is Emanon, written by Shinji Kajio with art by Kenji Tsuruta. This manga is based on the novel series written by Kajio, and you can check the description for the publication information. Now, what is this manga about? Well, I think of it as a thought experiment done in the form of a story. And the thought is, what if there was a person who lived for billions of years since the beginning of life on Earth? What would this person be doing? What would be their purpose for existing? Well, the answer to the first question is she would be backpacking across Japan like a hippie. But let's start from the beginning. The story begins on a passenger ferry in Japan, where a heartbroken student has taken a break from life to travel, and he meets a peculiar girl on board, who is our main character. He sees her initials EN and asks her her name, but she claims she doesn't have one. He keeps asking her until she chooses the anagram of no name, Emanon. This leaves him confused, but even more interested in getting to know her, and this is how we spend most of the first volume, with two young people getting to know each other. Very fun, very slice of life. But at one point in their evening, when they are having dinner, the topic of past events comes up, and she says something that implies that she was present to witness an event that happened in the 1800s. He's confused again. She drops the subject, not wanting things to get too weird too soon, and asks him about the book he was reading when they just met. And this leads to my only criticism of Volume 1. The ability of the main character in the book he's reading, Hauser's memory, is almost exactly like Emmelin's. And later, when she tells him her secret, she says there are two reasons she told him. One, because he was into sci-fi, so most likely he would believe her, and two, because he reminded her of her husband from a previous life. And for me, this plot element seemed too coincidental, too convenient, that this random guy would meet the criteria of having a book that so closely describes her ability, and at the same time looks like her former husband, like his doppelganger. But anyway, continuing, she trusts him to an extent and decides to explain her ability and history. And to summarize, she basically reincarnates at regular intervals, but with her memories kept intact. And they have this deep conversation about what it means, why it's happening to her, and forming theories. And to me, she follows the trope of many immortal characters who tend to be kind of tired of their prolonged existence. And the difference in her case is that she didn't actively seek out her immortality, she just is. And after it gets really deep into the philosophical implications of her existence, she pulls a 180 and says, I was just joking, none of this is real. I was just making conversation with you. And the guy is dumbstruck because he was so invested in the story. But then he's like, I don't care if she's a liar or crazy. I'm here enjoying myself. It doesn't matter. And they spend the rest of the night together. And in the morning, she up and disappears, leaving just a note. And he desperately searches for her all over the ship, but she's gone. And the story picks up years after this. The author loves to jump from, forward and backwards in time with the story, because Emanon is immortal. Time means nothing to her. 20 years ago is like yesterday to her. Which is why I think the story is often told from the perspective of people who interact with her. So years later at a train station, the guy is no longer a student. He has a job and family, but still hasn't forgotten Emanon. She's the girl that got away, and he keeps the note she left behind with him at all times. And on the day he sees a woman who looks just like her, and he goes over to see if she remembers, but she doesn't, and he's devastated. He drops the note and walks off. And guess what happens? The lady's daughter, who looks about 8, walks up to him with the note and says, "Hey, remember me? I'm Emanon." And in that moment, he realizes that she wasn't lying all those years ago. And we get an idea of how her power works. But the story ends with this meeting. He kind of, understands she has a greater purpose beyond a regular life like he has. And they go their separate ways. And the story could have ended here and I'd be satisfied, but it continues. Volume 2 starts with a mini story that happens after the main storyline, but I'm going to go chronologically. So Volume 2 continues the thought experiment with, what if the ancient immortal had a family? How would they be affected by her? The story starts like before with Emanon traveling, and she at one point starts to work for a family, and this triggers her memory of having a twin brother, which is an anomaly in her ancestry. She's usually born by herself, and she decides to seek him out. And through flashbacks, we learn of the circumstances of how they got separated. They eventually meet in the modern time, and on their initial contact, we learn that her brother, Takuma, was aware of her as well, in a supernatural sense. And he's a disgruntled, agitated guy. He knows nothing of their parents because he was raised an orphan, so he wants to track them down. But Emanon is the opposite. She doesn't seem to really care about that. And they have a back and forth where she slowly reveals her situation, like with the guy from Volume 1. And basically she tells him that the mother Emanon gives birth to the baby Emanon, then becomes empty. She loses her memory and becomes like, she's in a waking coma. And he's like, what about her dad? And she's like, he's just some random guy, it doesn't matter. And this kind of shows the disconnect between them. She doesn't feel the familial connection that a normal person would feel towards their relatives, because she exists eternally. Her bonds are, transient. Takuma, who has one life, wants to be connected, wants to have a family. Then from the flashback, we learn that she is actually the one who left him at the orphanage. But it's even worse, because not only is it that his sister left him there, but technically his mother too. They're one in the same. And for me as the reader, that kind of brings her character into question a bit. It was kind of heartless. And like any normal person would, upon learning that, Takuma becomes very angry. So angry that he literally produces fire and almost burns Emanon. So this revelation means that it is possible that there are other people with abilities in their world too. After this incident, they end up leaving each other on kind of bad terms. He really resents her. And the ending of the volume is mysterious because it's after a time skip, and she seeks him out again when he's an old man. And there seems to be some kind of agents, probably government agents, after her, which implies others are now aware of her abilities later down the line. So it's an interesting setup for future stories. The mini story I skipped over happens after their first meeting, and it involves Emanon intervening in an environmental crisis. Whereas before she was just, going through life, traveling, now she's actively doing something. And I wonder if this is because of the conversation she had with the first guy about her purpose. Is she now creating one? I'm going to do something. Or is it guilt because of how she treated her brother? Who knows? But in the story, she also meets a unique friend. The first friend we've seen her have, that the friendship happened prior to her appearance in the manga. And from their conversation, This girl apparently knows about her abilities, but also seems to be either able to see into the future or is immortal as well. It's never explained because this is her only appearance, but Volume 2 does a good job of expanding the world beyond the first story. Volume 3 continues with the thought experiment of Volume 2, but from a new perspective. It starts with Emanon being lost in a forest, and she is found by a man named Ryozo, who quickly realizes she is sick and has lost her memories. The only thing he knows is her name, Emma. She passes out and later wakes up in a hospital with Ryozo at her side. So obviously he cares about her, and using her belongings they try to piece together what happened to her before he found her. For now, she is stuck in the hospital, and at night she is haunted by nightmares. Not regular ones either, more like primordial type images. We know she is ancient, but she doesn't, so she's confused and scared. When she's well enough to leave the hospital, Ryozo invites her to stay with him until she recovers her memory. And she has nobody else, so she agrees. And the rest of the volume is about them developing a relationship. And it's funny because it's not what we are used to seeing from Emanon. In previous volumes, most of her relationships are temporary because she's a drifter. Of course, the circumstances dictate her actions here, but it's still out of character. So she starts living with him, helping around the household and with his job, while he investigates her past, but nothing comes up. She has no record. But he falls for her despite all of this, and they eventually get married. Life is now great with them. They take care of each other, lots of happy scenes, and eventually she gets pregnant. When she finally has the baby, man, it gets dark real quick. We get to see the results of the memory transfer. The Emanon we know is left like a zombie. She doesn't speak, she doesn't emote, and he is shocked because this lively woman he fell in love with is now a helpless person. Her consciousness is transferred to the baby, and the baby Emanon is now trapped in this smaller form. She can't talk to him, let him know, she's okay, console him or anything. And he now has to shoulder the responsibility of taking care of both of them alone. But thankfully, there's an epilogue. We are brought back to the train station, and we see it from Emma's perspective, and we realize the whole arc took place before Volume 1 ended. And a follow-up scene shows the mother now going by Emma. She's able to recover her functionality, not her memory. And she is able to be a mother to the new Emanon and a wife to Ryozo. So it's bittersweet in a way. This volume raised some important questions because I thought the memory transfer was instant, which in a sense it is, but she started losing it from way before while she was in the forest. So is it that she can sense when she needs to change over? Or was she pregnant before she met Ryozo? Is it like, the virgin birth? There's no answer. And that's where the story ends for now, with a new Emanon growing up. So it's an incomplete but thought-provoking story with awesome artwork. My criticisms are that many of the side characters aren't visually, distinct. Everybody looks related. Or maybe that's part of the plot. I don't know. And for a series that has a 3 billion-year-old character, there is a small number of supporting characters in the story itself. But anyway, recommended for mature readers who love slice of life stories because there's a lot of nudity and lots of talking. If you made it this far, thanks for listening. Check the description for more information on this series. See you on the next one.